Hey everybody, I'm here with Amy Riley, ISM's Enrollment Management Consultant, and today I have 4 questions for Amy. So Amy, are you ready?
Yes, I am
All right,
ready. Thank you.
all right, awesome. So first question I have is, how can admissions and enrollment management professionals, how can they go about creating a plan right now during the current crisis? Especially when you start thinking about transitioning your current admissions process to a virtual admissions process, everything from virtual tours to assessments and interviews. How can folks plan and plan for that right now?
hmm That's a great question. And what we would say is every school right now, unless you are fully enrolled and everyone is set for next year, needs to have an admission recruitment plan for the summer that will allow them to continue in a robust and meaningful way to engage prospective families all the way up till the start of school. And so that inevitably includes some sort of a virtual tour that allows the family to go ahead and see the campus facilities and the spaces, even though it's school's out, we don't have active learning happening there. And then certainly the ability to have conversations with families, just like we're doing right now in this Zoom environment. This is no less intimate a conversation about what a family's hopes and dreams are for their child than it is if we're sitting in an office looking at each other face to face. And so, getting into a Zoom platform, having those admission conversations, not interviews. Conversations implies an open exchange of ideas, and admission directors will learn so much more about the family and how to best serve the student when they open and approach the conversation in that way. And then, of course, the ability to apply online. It may be that there is the need to meet with academic division leaders or specific grade level classroom teachers to make up for the full day student visit that might occur during the regular admission season if school were in session. And then the last area, really assessment. So whatever your assessment process is, whatever your admission acceptance criteria is, all of that remains the same. And you just simply need to clarify that in your webpage messaging about admission, about how families will go about connecting in with you in this virtual kind of way. And then seeing to it that they can finish all that paperwork and helping them with that. That part's going to be a little bit difficult from sending schools now with other schools shut down. It may be that you need to have some conversations about some flexibility in things like teacher recommendations, although those are very important. But sometimes you just have to bend a little bit in the way that you approach these vital components of the admission process.
Something subtle that you mentioned, I've heard you mention this before, but I think it is kind of important about the interviews. We're used to
Mm-hmm.
calling them interviews, but you've
Mm-hmm.
said it before. You say call them conversations now.
Yes,
Or maybe just put folks
absolutely.
more at ease.
It does, because interview can feel daunting to the family. If it's a highly selective school, the family is already sort of stressed and anxious about whether or not their child will be accepted at the school. Anything that you can do that makes the family feel more relaxed and more open to the conversation. And frankly, you want to know what their hopes and dreams are for their child and what sort of educational experience they seek, so that you can help them make the right match. You hope it's you, but if it's not you, you have no interest in enrolling a family who's not going to be well served in your program.
That's a great point. And that leads me to my second question, and that is communication with parents. Right now, as we're going into the summer, parents, I think, are starting to ask the questions. What are we doing about summer programs? What are we doing about the fall? What are you doing about the fall? And I know we've heard from schools now wondering, how do they answer that question? How much do they divulge to parents? And frankly, what if the answer is, we're just not sure yet? So
Mm-hmm.
how can schools right now address those questions that are coming in from parents when there still is so much uncertainty about what's going
Mm-hmm.
on, especially for the fall?
Absolutely. Well, parents need a steady diet of not large amounts of information, but just essential information on a regular basis. So it would not be hard for me to imagine that once a week, the school is still reaching out to parents just to give brief little progress updates about the things that the school is doing to prepare both for adapted, blended learning right now, online learning environments, but also to think ahead about the fall. The other thing I would say is schools should begin at this point to really seek out recommendations from the state public health system, from the CDC, from the federal government, and really begin to amass a collection of recommendations for how to re-enter school or how to re-enter all these normal functions. And that, I believe, will begin to take us from where we've been for the past 8 weeks, which is sort of in shock and awe, let's be honest, about how could we have ever imagined 2 months ago when everything was going swimmingly for a lot of people that everything would be where we are today, to the next 8 weeks, which is concrete planning and thought processes about what does it look like to reopen. It's okay to tell parents, we don't know yet. We're still collecting data and information. Data and information is still being released at the state and federal level. As that comes out, we're working together as a leadership team to make decisions that will be in the best interest of your child and all the other children enrolled at the school. That's the message parents need to hear. How is this going to affect me? What is the school doing? Is the school on top of things? This is the moment for a leadership team to really shine as highly competent, capable people, even in the face of a great unknown. And we don't know what the next, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months will look like. It's okay to say that you don't know, but these are the things you are doing to find out. Parents are fine with that. And don't deluge them with communication. Remember that parents right now are trying to do their jobs at home, often adapting for the first time to working from home and all that it entails, while still supervising, particularly if they have younger students, the online learning of their children. I've heard tales of competing schedules. Who's using Zoom, the parent for work or the child for school? How do we manage the bandwidth in the home? So this is a time for the school to really exercise wise, measured, paced, temperate communication and demonstrate a calm in a storm that will be a reason for families to trust the school moving forward, knowing that or expecting that we may be dealing with this, 1 or 2 more times before we have developed a vaccine or treatments that are reliable.
So let's stay on that topic then of communication, but in a slightly different way. And now the question is, how do you communicate? How do you tell your story, right? This was actually a question that came up, when this first happened. I remember we held our first webinar. Some of the questions that were coming in is, how do we communicate our mission and value to parents? When so much of that felt like it needed to be done on campus. And obviously we're not on campus right now, and who knows if we're going to be on campus here in the fall. But how can schools right now tell their story of the online learning experience? And how do you still communicate your mission and value to parents and students, even though we can't be on campus?
In this area, I would really encourage admission directors, enrollment managers to think about the time when they were new to the school. And they had to capture the story of the school in all of its aspects, from the extracurricular program to the academic, to the athletics, to the arts. And they did that typically by spending some portion of every week of that first year on the job, visiting in classrooms, getting to know teachers, getting to understand the curricular scope and sequence by division, by grade level, in order to tell that story, because we can't rely upon teachers to tell us the story during active learning, because if we multiplied that by how many applicants we address in a year, that would be highly disruptive of the learning. So approach it like that you're in discovery mode and you've got to learn what that's like. And that's going to entail probably asking teachers for permission to attend some of these classes while we still have a few more weeks in the regular session, so that you can get a feel for the intimacy and the dynamic between teachers and students in a virtual learning environment. How have they adapted? We're hearing marvelous stories of what teachers are doing to rapidly adapt learning. And what I would say to schools is, while rapid adaptation and change and adjustment was the tune this round, that will not be acceptable next round, right? Everybody got a pass for being surprised by COVID, this first wave. But if we're struggling in January or February, when the federal government comes down with, we need another 4 weeks of separation because now we've converged with seasonal flu, we've got a big outbreak, the school needs to be prepared for that in a way that it is literally like throwing the switch. So I would say at pre-planning time for teachers, if I'm an academic leader, you're already asking for teachers to prepare for at least a month of online learning and have that all tucked away so that we literally can throw that switch. So we can only ride, this is a new phenomenon, for a short period of time before we have to start mastering the solutions and the reentry.
You know, something I just thought of as you were talking about schools do have tremendous examples of their faculty doing an amazing job. And in telling that story, I actually saw recently from a school they were actually inviting the prospective parents to join in on the real live classrooms.
Absolutely.
To experience. And so, you know, if you feel great about your online learning experience right now, that can be just, again, a general idea to, you know, really invite folks in and then see it for themselves.
And you could be organized about that. You know, you've heard us talk many times about the interactive open house and the need for the prospective family to see what learning looks like in your school rather than just have you tell them or describe it. The same thing can happen virtually. You can have prospective parents literally visiting multiple classrooms at a grade level over a period of time. All of this can be scheduled and they can jump in and get a feel for what that's like. I dare say, because of the medium itself, you probably would have interactivity with teachers and students in that context. And so these are quick ways, high-tech ways to just literally flip your thinking into sort of this new reality, which, you know, can be managed. We know that it can. The value proposition piece is a big deal. It's a big deal because private independent schools are going to have to overcome the fact that most states have a virtual K-12 program. And if families are uncomfortable with reentry, even if reentry to school is possible, we can imagine that a number of parents, many parents, may choose to stay home and be looking at these various curriculums. And so this is the time for the private independent school community to talk about the value add. In many cases, anecdotally, we've seen the private school community step up and offer robust learning in a much more efficient way and a much more in-depth kind of way than what we've seen in some of the public systems. Some of the public systems indeed had no work requirements at all and very little learning and planning. They basically just shut down the year. Those systems now are engaged in this battle of, do we repeat winter semester when we start in the fall, or do we start in the fall and move on? What are the gaps in learning? You know, we've known for a long time that the agrarian school calendar, which is antiquated and unnecessary in most regions of the country now, creates a loss of learning. Now that loss of learning lapse of about 2.5 months is now 5 months. And in the life of a very young student or child, 5 months of lack of focused learning is inevitably going to create the need to make up some of those gaps in developmental milestones and school readiness.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that leads into my last question here, and it's actually about your workshop. So, you know, for the past 6 years, and this would be your 7th year in the summer running your Mastering Enrollment Management workshop. And I just wanted to ask you about it because, you know, what can folks expect to learn now in this workshop, which is being held virtually this summer? You know, talk about that course in general, and have you had to make any sort of pivots, you know, in terms of the content that is in that course, just given our current environment?
Yes. So as all the teachers and educators are having to do, we're having to make those same pivots too. And one of the first sort of in your face realities or acknowledgement is that you can't do as much as you could in a face-to-face class. And so you have to make some choices. What I am certain of is that ISM's enrollment management framework, which is really just a a thinking scaffolding, a collection of factors that if the school maintains a focus on these factors, gives you the highest likelihood of actually delivering the predicted and sought after enrollment outcomes that you have set for yourself on any given year. We know those factors are the same and matter pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. So that part is going to be the same. We will look at market position clarity. We will look at the quality of the school culture, the nature of the school culture, and what are the factors that ensure it's a strong, healthy one. And we'll look at the constituent relationship piece. And basically the approach will be, you know, here's the concept, here's the best practice. Now, knowing that, what is this going to look like for the next 6 months in the era of COVID? So it is inevitable in an enrollment management course or conversation that we will be applying things in a COVID context, because it might require us to do the same work, but approach it in a different way or think about it in a different way. And what I can tell people about the course itself is, because it's virtual, because we know you're home, many of you with children, even in the summer, we are looking at about 3 hours of direct instruction contact time, so synchronous learning 3 hours, but all separated by asynchronous hours. So you're never on the computer more than an hour doing a particular activity before you pivot and switch. And so we think that allows us to get in all of the key concepts, get some really great conversation among peer-to-peer people. We'll be using Zoom, so you will be able to see classmates. We'll get to know each other just like we do in a live workshop. We'll get to hear about each other's challenges. And then my encouragement to anyone who's considering the workshop is to begin to amass some data now, because the more data you have on the ready, the more you will be able to use those asynchronous times to apply what you're learning directly to the data at your school, and then extend that into goal making and an enrollment management plan that will be a plan that will see you through the next year for all that entails.
Fantastic. Look, I've been attending that workshop for the past several years. I love it. It's one of my favorite workshops. I learn something new every time. So I'm looking forward on sitting in remotely this time this summer. So I'm looking forward to it. Well, Amy, thank you. Thank you for being on the hot seat here. 4 questions with Amy. I appreciate it. And if anybody's interested in the workshop, you can find more information about the workshop below, details, schedule, and hopefully you all can make it. Thank you, Amy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Clint. And thank you, everyone. And if anyone would like to email me or have a conversation to discuss further, I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks.
Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.